Life is Strange Double Exposure's first 2 chapters are out today, and courtesy of Square-Enix, I've played them all the way through early and I wanted to share my impressions. And don't worry, there won't be any major spoilers in this video, especially given this game's narrative focus. To kick it off immediately, this is a narrative adventure game that I'd describe as a sort of fantasy mystery. The central plot revolves around Max Caulfield, a girl who, in the wake of the death of someone close to her, unlocks the power to shift between timelines. One where her friend is dead, and one where her friend is alive. But that's actually simplifying it a bit because this game takes the parallel timeline concept to the next level. But first, let's back up a bit. The gameplay mostly consists of you controlling Max as she explores the areas in and around the campus of Caledon University. As you explore, you can examine countless things in the environment as Max details her thoughts through a very extensive internal monologue. The environments in this world are very detailed and realistic, and you get a good look at them during some of the points in the game where there's these kind of chill moments. This game has a lot of heavy subject matter, but there's these little moments where Max can do something like, for example, just sit down and drink her cafe drink while it cycles through shots of the environment around her, and some chill, relaxing music plays. Moments like these, along with the fact that you can inspect basically anything you want, are really refreshing during a time where most games seem like they want to move at a breakneck pace. Like, you can just beeline from objective to objective, but there's no punishment for taking it at your own pace and just immersing yourself in this world. Another fun little thing I noticed is that during one of the cutscenes in Max's house, you can see a random person just walking about outside in the background. Not an important character, just a totally random, insignificant, yet realistic depiction of reality that you don't see most games do. And speaking of immersion, there's a whole phone interface where Max regularly receives text messages from a variety of characters, along with a straight-up social media app where you can post photos that you've taken throughout the narrative and see what everyone else is up to in what feels almost like real time. This is already cool on the surface, but they took it to the next level by completely changing what you see in your text messages and the social media app depending on which timeline you're in, starting from the point of convergence. This is a ridiculously cool detail that absolutely had to have been a nightmare to add in, since it pretty much doubles the workload for the writers, I imagine. This is one of those cool details that really drives home how much the game can suck you in with its immersion and suspension of disbelief, despite the crazy timeline shifting elements. And to segue a little bit, the art direction for the characters is really unique to me. The characters are realistic, however, in a style that kind of toes the line between being hyper-real and cartoonish, but it still makes the super realistically animated faces work really well. Characters are very expressive, not only in their speech and mouth movements, but even in their eyes and the tiny details like subtle winces and welling up tears. Couple that with realistic, well-delivered dialogue, and you have what feels almost like an entertaining live-action TV show playing out in front of you. I probably should talk a bit about the gameplay though. So the way Max's shifting power works is incredibly interesting. At any given time, you're in one of 2 timelines, alive or dead, and you can activate the shift ability to get a big AoE preview of sorts of the differences between the 2 timelines, which are shown as a sort of colored apparition. There's all kinds of natural differences, like the placement and movements of people and objects, which people are there, and of course the environment too. So for example, in the dead timeline, you might see an object or person in the alive timeline who isn't actually there in this timeline, or vice versa. However, Max can also perceive sounds in those environments, opening the door for some really interesting uses of her powers, like for example, gathering intel she wouldn't normally be able to. And of course, she can use this power to get into places she can't normally get to either. If a door is locked in one timeline but not in the other, she can simply shift to the timeline where it's unlocked, walk through it, then shift back if there's a shift point available. And yeah, you can't just shift literally anywhere. You have to do it inside of one of these energy field things called shift points. You can use the power to see the surrounding environment anywhere though, and the shift points are frequent enough that you may as well be able to shift anywhere anyways. There's so many unique and fun ways that this shift mechanic is used, and seeking out all the little differences between each timeline is really fun and sucked up a lot of my playtime here. I legitimately spent at least half the time I was playing this game just walking around and examining things in both timelines, which isn't at all required by the way, but you're definitely rewarded for it with world building and, from what I can tell, more hints to the overall mystery behind the game's story. Now, there may be even more to this power than meets the eye, but I'm not gonna risk spoiling anything because even I don't know the full extent. Also, when you start the game, there's a healthy number of accessibility options, including some that pleasantly surprised me, like content warnings for a variety of things, including loud sounds, bright lights, and sensitive topics. Of course, anyone who's familiar with a game like this knows that there's also a big element of choice, and the choices you make seem to have a pretty big rippling effect on the story. And I'm gonna be real, some of these choices are hard. I won't go into them too much because I don't want to spoil anything again, but I just want to say that one of these choices in particular that the game made me make was hard enough that I had to stop playing the game for like 10 minutes just to consider it, and I can't wait to see how other people handled it because, wow. But just know that the choices here definitely feel impactful, and it's really nice that you get a breakdown of how everyone else chose everything at the end of each chapter. Speaking of choices, you also get a choice as to what Max wears indoors and outdoors. Of course, this version of the game came with Final Fantasy's Chocobo, Cactuar, and Moogle getups, so why wouldn't I choose those? Also, without going into too much detail, I have this theory that maybe the clothing choice will eventually have an impact on the story, and once you play the game, you'll hopefully understand why I'm wondering, but again, that's just a theory, might be nothing. Still, overall, the biggest draw for me is looking at all the differences between these two different timelines. It's really cool, and only made cooler by the whole mystery angle, because you get clues as to what's going on behind the mystery, and the clues can change between the timelines. Not only that, but on top of each timeline having its own set of text messages and social media posts, even Max's relationships with specific characters can change between the different timelines, depending on the actions that she's taken that the player sometimes has control of. So now I need to address one more thing. This is my first Life is Strange title. This is definitely not the first Life is Strange title, but it's my first. And while I'm not going to spoil any of the other Life is Strange games, I will warn anyone going into this that this game definitely spoils the first one, at least a little bit. That being said, I was so blown away by this, I plan to play through every single Life is Strange game, and I will be making a retrospective on it, don't you worry. However, I will also say that as someone who hasn't played the previous games, there's this level of mystique that the game instills. Max's backstory is left not vague, but definitely open to a bit of interpretation, which seems to be by design, since the original game could have ended in more than one way. This, for me, actually enhanced this game's story. I've really enjoyed the atmosphere of mystery, and having part of Max's life entangled in that mystery, for me, as a player, makes the experience feel a lot more unique, and there hasn't been a single time where I feel like I'm missing out in any major way anyways. Like, I'll bet I'd have a much bigger appreciation for some of the references and callbacks to the first game, but I'm still enjoying this as a standalone experience, and there hasn't been a single time where I felt lost or confused. Not to say that this is totally isolated and unrelated to the first game, but I can confidently say that it stands on its own, and I could easily recommend this to people like me with no previous experience with this franchise. Now, I'm not gonna spoil anything about where the story actually goes by the end of Chapter 2. However, what I will say is that there are very few times in my life where a video game story has left me speechless, and this was one of those times. I cannot wait to get my hands on the remaining chapters, because there's clearly still quite a lot left to uncover in this game, and you can expect a more structured and complete review once the full set of remaining chapters are released. As it stands though, this game blew me away, and I highly recommend it to basically anyone who likes narratively driven games. There's a lot to love here, and I can't wait to see what chapters 3 and on have in store. Before I go, I want to give a huge thanks to my patrons and channel members, including That's Ash and Mimi Gogo in the Played Every Game tier, along with all of these wonderful people you see on the screen. Thank you so much for the support, and thank you, person watching this, for your support as well. I'll see you very soon, and until then, have a fantastic day.